Victor Kane had no time to think, just act. One moment he was holding his son's hand, walking home from the grocery store with a bag of off-brand cereal and canned soup, and the next, a woman in a blood-red coat collapsed right in front of them on the icy sidewalk. "Dad!" Wyatt's small voice cracked with alarm as he pointed at the woman. Victor dropped the grocery bag, cans rolling into the gutter, and rushed to the woman's side. Her lips were pale, her skin clammy. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered barely. She didn't respond. He looked around. No one, just the cold, gray street and the distant sound of traffic. He pulled his phone from his pocket with shaking hands. "Stay with me, okay?" he whispered to the woman, even though she couldn't hear him. "You're gonna be fine." 911, what's your emergency? "There's a woman, she collapsed corner of Maple and 5th. She's not responsive. Please hurry." He took off his only decent coat, already too thin for the winter, and tucked it under her head. Wyatt stood close, eyes wide, clinging to his dad's leg. "Is she gonna die?" Wyatt whispered. "No, buddy," Victor said, though he wasn't sure. "She's gonna be okay." The ambulance arrived fast. Victor stepped aside as paramedics rushed in. One of them looked up at him. "You the one who called?" "Yeah." "Good thing you did. Her pulse was dropping. You probably saved her life." Victor didn't feel like a hero. He felt cold, broke, and worried that the spilled groceries meant another skipped dinner. But he nodded and held Wyatt tighter. Before they loaded her into the ambulance, the woman stirred. Her eyes opened bright, green, and dazed. She looked directly at Victor. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Then she passed out again. 2 days later, Victor was wiping tables at the diner, where he worked the night shift, when a woman walked through the door. "Hey," she said softly. He looked up and nearly dropped the coffee pot. It was her. The woman in the red coat, now standing, alive, and very much awake. She was even more striking in the light. Long dark hair pinned back neatly, a tailored cream coat, and high-heeled boots that didn't belong anywhere near this part of town. "You're hi," he said, awkwardly putting down the pot. "You're okay." She smiled. "Yeah, thanks to you." He blinked. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to thank you, properly." "You don't have to." "I do," she said, stepping closer. "You saved my life, and I didn't even get your name." Victor wiped his hand on his apron and offered it. "Victor Kane." She took it. "Brielle Garner." "Nice to meet you again. Conscious." That made her laugh, a soft, genuine sound. "I brought you something," she said, placing a small white bag on the counter. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She looked past him toward the kitchen, then down at his shoes, scuffed and well-worn. "You work here?" "Yeah, nights mostly. I've got a kid, so." "Right, your son, Wyatt." "You remember his name." "I remember everything from when I woke up. You look terrified." Victor scratched the back of his neck. "Didn't want you dying on the sidewalk in front of my kid." She smiled again. "Well, you didn't let that happen." He opened the white bag. Inside was a gift card, a really big gift card. He looked up, startled. "This is worth like $500. She shrugged like it was nothing. "Dinner, groceries, whatever you and Wyatt need." He pushed it back toward her. "I can't take this." "Why not?" "Because I don't know you, and I didn't do it for money." Her gaze didn't waver. "I didn't give it to you for that. I gave it to you because I wanted to." He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. "I'll let you get back to work," she said, stepping back, "but I hope I'll see you again." He watched her walk out, completely confused by everything about her. 3 days later, she came back. This time in jeans and a soft blue sweater, hair tied in a braid. Victor was bussing a table. "You again." Me again, she said, sliding into a booth. You free after your shift? He blinked. Why? Because owe you dinner, and found this amazing Korean place not far from here. He folded his arms. You don't owe me anything. I know, she said, smiling, but I want to see you. Victor hesitated. I've got Wyatt. Bring him. He stared at her. You want to have dinner with me and my 6-year-old? She leaned forward. I want to have dinner with the man who saved my life and his kid. That night, Brielle sat across from them in a tiny restaurant with string lights and sizzling plates of bulgogi. Wyatt was telling her about his favorite superhero, crumbs on his face. Victor watched her laugh at his son's jokes like she wasn't faking it, like she meant it. You're good with him, Victor said quietly. I like kids, she said, and he's pretty great. You're full of surprises. You have no idea. Over the next few weeks, she kept showing up. She brought Wyatt a sketchpad when she found out he liked to draw. She surprised Victor at the diner with coffee. She asked questions, real ones, about his life, his dreams, what he wanted for Wyatt. He didn't ask much about her. She said she worked in finance, lived uptown, that was enough. But one night, when she picked them up for dinner, yes, she kept doing that. Victor finally saw the car. A sleek black Bentley. He blinked. That yours? She hesitated. Yeah. You said you worked in finance, not owned it. She smiled, almost sheepish. I'm technically the CEO of a firm my grandfather built. Victor stared at her. You're rich. Billionaire, she said softly, like it embarrassed her. He didn't say anything. Still want to have dinner with me? She asked, suddenly unsure. He looked at her, really looked. Brielle, I liked you before I knew a thing about your money. Her eyes softened. I liked you before I could even stand up. He laughed, shaking his head. Come on, she said, opening the passenger door for Wyatt. Dinner's on me. Isn't it always? She grinned. Get used to it. Victor stood in front of the mirror in his worn button-down shirt, adjusting the collar for the 3rd time. He hadn't owned a tie in years, and the idea of wearing one tonight somehow felt ridiculous and necessary all at once. Wyatt was already sitting on the bed, swinging his legs back and forth, clutching the little action figure Brielle had given him last week. You look like you're going to a wedding, Wyatt said through a giggle. Victor gave him a look. You know we don't go out to fancy places often. I just don't want to embarrass you. Wyatt shrugged. I think you look like a movie star. Victor laughed under his breath. Thanks, buddy. A horn honked outside. Victor glanced out the window and saw the same sleek car pull up to the curb. She was early. He grabbed Wyatt's coat, helped him into it, and locked up behind them. When they stepped out, Brielle was already out of the car, leaning against the door in a long, tailored navy coat. Her heels crunched lightly on the sidewalk as she stepped forward. Hi, she said, her voice brighter than usual. Victor rubbed the back of his neck. Hope we're not underdressed. She looked him up and down once. You're perfect. Wyatt tugged on her hand. Do they have dessert where we're going? She bent down to his level. 3 kinds, and I already called ahead to make sure they save you the chocolate one. Wyatt's eyes widened. No way. All yours, she said, winking at him before rising to her feet. The restaurant was nothing like Victor expected. It wasn't grand or flashy. Instead, it was tucked beneath a row of ivy-covered buildings, with soft candlelight glowing behind the windows. Inside, the walls were lined with bookshelves, violins played softly overhead, and the tablecloths were crisp white without a single wrinkle. Victor shifted uncomfortably in the seat across from Brielle. You really didn't have to do all this. I didn't do it to impress you, she said, laying her napkin on her lap. I did it because I like being here, and I like being here with you. Wyatt was already digging into a small plate of pasta, oblivious to the tension between the adults. Victor leaned in slightly. You ever just want to disappear for a while, pretend you're not who you are? Her eyes flicked up to meet his, every day. He hadn't expected that answer. She twisted the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. When you grow up with expectations stapled to your name, it doesn't matter what you want. People see your last name first. Everything else comes second. Victor nodded slowly. Can't imagine that life. I couldn't imagine yours, she said softly, until I met you. He looked at her, really looked, and saw something behind the polished exterior, a weariness, like she was constantly performing and didn't know how to stop. You're not what I thought you'd be, he admitted. What did you think? I figured someone with your kind of money wouldn't even look twice at a guy like me. She tilted her head. Maybe that's why I did. The rest of dinner passed with gentle conversation and quiet laughter. Wyatt fell asleep in the booth next to Victor just as the waiter brought out dessert. Victor brushed a hand over his son's hair, lowering his voice. You don't have to keep doing this. Doing what? Taking us to places like this, buying him things, paying for everything. I'm not trying to buy anything, Victor. Then what are you trying to do? She paused, then leaned forward, her voice low. I'm trying to make you see that you matter to me, not because you saved my life, not because you're a good dad, but because you see me when no one else does. Victor's chest tightened. He wasn't used to being seen really seen. Most days he moved through life like he was invisible, just trying to get through the next shift, the next bill, the next bedtime story. He looked away, unsure of what to do with the weight of her words. When they dropped him off at the apartment, Brielle stepped out with them. She helped Victor carry Wyatt, who was still half asleep, up the stairs. Once inside, she took in the small living room, the faded couch, the pile of laundry in the corner. I didn't expect you to come up, he said, shifting Wyatt in his arms. I wanted to. He tucked Wyatt into bed, then returned to find her standing by the window, looking out over the city. You can see the bridge from here, she said quietly. Only if the lights are on. She turned to face him. I'm not used to this. Quiet. Victor stayed near the door, unsure how close he should get. I'm not used to anyone else being here. She stepped toward him, slow and sure. I don't want to rush anything, but I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere. He swallowed hard. That's easy to say when you've got a driver waiting downstairs. She smiled faintly, canceled the car. He blinked. You what? I'm staying at a hotel a few blocks away. I walked here. Victor stared at her. You didn't tell me you were nearby. I didn't want to push, but I wanted to be close. He crossed the room then, standing just a breath away. You're not like anyone I've ever met. She met his gaze. Neither are you. The silence stretched between them, thick with something neither of them wanted to name just yet. Then a soft knock sounded from the bedroom door. Wyatt stood there, rubbing his eyes. I forgot my bear. Victor moved past her and found the stuffed animal under the couch. As he handed it over, Wyatt looked up at Brielle. Are you staying for a story? She hesitated only a second. If it's okay with your dad. Victor looked at her then nodded. Yes, it's okay. Wyatt climbed back into bed, and Brielle sat beside him, listening intently as Victor read aloud. When the last page turned and Wyatt's breathing evened out, she met Victor's eyes across the room. Neither of them spoke, but something had shifted. Something real. Something that neither money nor circumstance could define. Victor hadn't planned on seeing Brielle again that week, not after the storybook evening she spent in their apartment reading beside Wyatt's bed. He figured something that perfect had to be a peak, one of those rare moments that life offered before retreating into the ordinary again. But the next morning, while Wyatt was finishing cereal at the kitchen table, there was a knock at the door. Victor opened it to find an older woman with silver hair pinned into a neat twist, holding a folded piece of paper. "Mr. Kane?" she asked, her voice warm but precise. "Yes." She handed him the note. "MS. Garner arranged something for you and your son, cars waiting downstairs." Victor opened the note and scanned it, his brow furrowed. "This is a reservation confirmation for a museum." She thought Wyatt might enjoy it. The exhibit closes after today. Victor looked past her, spotting a black SUV parked at the curb. "You work for her?" "I've worked for her family for over 30 years, she said, then added, "She told me not to take no for an answer." Victor turned to Wyatt. "You want to see dinosaur bones?" Wyatt's eyes lit up. "Do they have the big ones?" Victor smiled. "Let's go find out." They spent the morning wandering through the museum's echoing halls, Wyatt darting between towering skeletons, while Victor kept a cautious eye on the woman who'd accompanied them. She didn't speak much, only occasionally offering historical trivia or pulling out a tissue when Wyatt sneezed in the ancient Egypt wing. Afterward, the driver took them to a small cafe tucked behind the museum. The hostess led them to a reserved table with Wyatt's name folded into a place card. There was a wrapped box waiting for him, inside of which was a dinosaur puzzle and a small plush brontosaurus. Victor looked at the woman. "She did all this?" She nodded. "MS. Garner makes very few personal arrangements, but when she does, they matter." Later that evening, Victor sat on the edge of his bed folding socks when his phone rang. He answered without checking the screen. "I hope I didn't overstep." Brielle's voice came through, hesitant for the first time in days. "You didn't," he said, setting the laundry aside. "Wyatt's already asleep, holding that ridiculous dinosaur." "I saw that one and thought of him. It's got this dopey expression, but it's kind of sweet." Victor chuckled. He named it Sir Chomps-a-lot. A pause followed, then softer, "I miss you." He closed his eyes. "You saw us this morning." "I know, but I keep wanting more time, more of this." He couldn't speak for a moment. Then, carefully, "I don't always know what to do with that." "You don't have to know, just let me in a little." A few days passed before they saw each other again. Brielle showed up at the diner after Victor's shift, dressed down in sneakers and a hoodie, hair pulled through the back of a baseball cap. She looked like someone else entirely, someone younger, freer. She slid into a booth and waited until he joined her. "I needed a break," she said, picking at a muffin she'd brought with her. "From meetings, obligations, my mother's voice in my head telling me how I should be running the company." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Don't you already run it?" "I'm the face of it," she replied. "She's still the voice behind the curtain." He sipped water from a plastic cup. "Why not walk away?" "Because it's mine, even if it came with strings." Victor leaned back. "You ever think about cutting them?" "All the time," she said, then looked at him. "You ever think about starting over somewhere else?" He shrugged. "I've got Wyatt, his school, his routines. I can't just pick up and disappear." "I wasn't suggesting we vanish," she said. "Just wondering if you ever wanted more than this." Victor looked around the diner. The cracked vinyl booths, the hum of the soda machine. "I want him to be proud of me. That's more than enough for now." She studied him. "You don't let yourself want things." "I don't have the luxury." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "Can I want enough for both of us just for a little while?" He didn't answer. Not long after, Brielle invited him to an event, something she called a small gathering, which turned out to be a rooftop soiree atop a downtown skyscraper. complete with a private string quartet and chandeliers suspended from steel beams. She met him in the elevator, wearing a navy blue gown that shimmered like starlight, her hair swept to one side. Victor adjusted the collar of the jacket she'd sent him earlier that week with a handwritten note. Just in case you need something that fits. He stepped into the open air of the rooftop, stunned by the view. The skyline glittered around them, and Brielle took his arm like they'd done this 100 times before. But they hadn't. "Why am I here?" he asked quietly as they passed elegantly dressed guests sipping champagne. "Because I want people to see you," she said, "and because I want you to see yourself the way I do." He looked out at the horizon, then back at her. "I'm not comfortable in this world." "You don't have to be. I'll walk beside you." A man approached them, older, his suit crisp and tailored to perfection. He had Brielle's eyes, only colder. "This must be him," the man said. Victor straightened. "I'm Victor Kane." The man didn't offer a hand. "I'm her uncle, and I need you to understand something. She's not average, she's not available, and she's certainly not here for charity." Brielle stepped in. "Don't." "I'm protecting what matters," her uncle snapped. "This isn't a place for sentiment." Victor stayed still. "I didn't ask to be here. She invited me. And now I'm asking you to leave." Brielle's shoulders squared. "He stays or I go." Her uncle's face darkened, but he said nothing, just turned and melted into the crowd. Victor exhaled. "I didn't come here to start a war." "You didn't," she said, eyes still locked on the place her uncle had stood. "But I might." Later that night, they rode the elevator back down in silence. As they reached the lobby, Victor turned to her. "You're risking a lot." She looked up at him. "You're worth it." He shook his head. "You don't even know everything about me. You've seen parts, but not the hard stuff, not the things that made me who I am." "Then tell me." He hesitated. "Not here." "Then where?" He thought for a moment. "Come by tomorrow, I'll show you." "Show me what?" "The rest of my world." Victor placed the last of the folding chairs into the storage closet at the community center, wiping his hands on his jeans as he stepped back into the main hall. The weekend art program had just ended, and Wyatt was still crouched on the floor adding the final glitter-streaked touches to a cardboard rocket ship. Across the room, Brielle stood in heels that clearly didn't belong in a room with glue sticks and paint-stained easels, yet she looked entirely at ease, her arms crossed as she watched. "I told you it was chaos," Victor said, walking over. She glanced at him. "Chaos is better than silence, especially here." He leaned against the wall beside her. "You still sure you want to see the rest of my world?" "I already am," she said, then turned to face him. "But I'm guessing this isn't what you meant when you said that." He nodded slowly. "There's something I need you to understand." He motioned toward the door. "Come on, it's just a few blocks." She didn't hesitate. They walked past rows of rusted fences and uneven sidewalks, the winter air sharp as it slid between cracked bricks. Eventually, they turned down an alley that opened into a gravel lot behind a low-rise building. Victor pulled a key from his back pocket and unlocked the rusted door. The space inside was cold and empty, save for an old drafting table, a few scattered tools, and a massive canvas covered by a stained drop cloth. The walls were lined with sketches. Not of people, but of machines, some elegant, some practical, all drawn with a precision that revealed a meticulous hand. "I used to work in fabrication," Victor said, crossing the room. "Not just metalwork, concept design, prototypes. Had a partner. We were working on modular housing solutions, affordable structures that could go up in under a week. Then Wyatt's mom got sick, real sick. Had to walk away from all of it." Brielle took her time, walking past the sketches, her fingers grazing the edge of the table. "You never told me you were an engineer." "I don't talk about it much," he said. Doesn't pay the bills anymore. She stopped in front of the canvas. May I? He nodded. She pulled the drop cloth away to reveal a half-painted rendering of a compact, sustainable housing complex, lush rooftop gardens, solar grids, glass corridors that curved into the horizon. It was bold and breathtaking. You built a future, she said softly. I built a dream, couldn't afford to finish, he replied. She turned to him. Why haven't you shown this to anyone? He shrugged. Because it's not real, not yet, and people don't invest in not yet, not when you're a single dad with no backing, no resources, and no time to chase blueprints. She walked closer, her voice low. Victor, you didn't just rescue me on a sidewalk. You built a world that could rescue others, and you've been doing it alone. He looked at her, hesitation thick in his chest. I'm not asking for anything. I know, she said. That's why I want to give it to you. He went still. She reached into her coat and retrieved a slim folder, handing it to him without ceremony. Had my team run a feasibility analysis based on the sketches you left lying around your apartment. Don't look at me like that. Took pictures when you weren't looking. He opened the folder. Inside were graphs, projections, potential partners, even zoning pathways. I don't need your money, he said, voice tight. No, she said. You need belief, and maybe someone who knows how to get people to listen. He stared at the folder. You did all this. I don't hand out favors, Victor. I back vision, and yours deserves to be built. Silence stretched between them. Then finally he looked up. This changes everything. She smiled, quiet at first, then with growing warmth. That's the point. Later that evening, back at the apartment, Victor stood in the doorway watching Wyatt fall asleep, the dinosaur plush tucked under one arm. He turned to find Brielle in the kitchen, stirring a pot with her coat still draped over the back of the chair. You're cooking now? He asked, surprised. I YouTubed it, she said. It's edible, probably. He stepped forward. Why are you really doing all this? She turned. Because I finally found something that matters more than boardrooms and net worth. Because I want a life that includes the sound of Wyatt's laugh and your silence when you're working, and the way your eyes change when you're proud but trying not to show it. He stared at her, unsure what to say. She added, and if that's too much, I'll back off. I'll never ask you to be something you're not. But I'm not going to pretend, don't want this. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and pressed his forehead against hers. You're not too much, he whispered. She closed her eyes, then let me stay. He kissed her slow, certain, not like the start of something, but like the moment when something finally unfolds after too long held back. They didn't speak again until the next morning. The week that followed moved quickly. Brielle invited a team of architects to tour Victor's workspace. Wyatt got his first official sketch featured at the community center art wall. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers about the elegant woman who kept showing up in worn jeans and helping paint murals alongside local kids. Then, on a Sunday morning, Victor stepped onto the community center stage, overwhelmed by the number of people seated in folding chairs before him. Brielle stood just behind the curtain, giving him a nod. He cleared his throat. I never thought I'd be up here talking about a future I thought I lost. But someone reminded me that where you come from doesn't decide where you end up. What you build does. The applause was real. So was the check handed to him afterward seed, funding from a partnership Brielle had arranged without fanfare. That night, as Wyatt slept and Brielle curled beside him on the couch, Victor said, You turned my world upside down. She gave a soft laugh. You saved mine first. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Then, let's stop trying to balance the scale. Let's just build something together. Her gaze met his, unwavering. Already am. A month later, surrounded by Wyatt, a few close friends, and a judge with a crooked tie, they stood in the rooftop garden of their new community housing prototype. There were no fireworks, no orchestra, but there was laughter, vows whispered with shaking hands, and a kiss that sealed a future neither of them had seen coming. Victor Kane, the man who once counted pennies to buy cereal, had fallen in love with a woman worth billions, and she with him not because of what they lacked, but because of how they saw each other. Not as saviors, but as equals. Their world wasn't perfect. It was better. It was real. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air as Victor stepped onto the sun-drenched balcony of their new home and airy, two-bedroom unit on the top floor of the first completed housing prototype. It wasn't grand, not by the standards Brielle had grown up with, but it was theirs. A home they had chosen together, built from the ground up as a symbol of everything they'd fought for: stability, future, love. He reached for the coffee mug left on the railing and turned as Brielle walked out barefoot, her silk robe tied loosely at the waist, hair still damp from the shower. She carried a half-awake Wyatt in her arms, the boy's head resting against her shoulder as he blinked against the late morning sun. "He was looking for you," she said, kissing the top of Wyatt's head before setting him gently down on the lounge chair. Victor reached for his son and pulled him into his lap. "Hey, sleepyhead, you forget this is Saturday." Wyatt yawned into his shirt. "I dreamed we had a castle." Brielle sat beside them, brushing a curl from Wyatt's face. "You don't need a castle. You've got the best room in the whole building." "And the highest ceiling," Victor added. "Perfect for rocket posters." Wyatt grinned, already more awake. "Does that mean we can hang the glow-in-the-dark stars today?" Victor nodded. "Soon as I finish the cabinet installation downstairs." "I can help," Wyatt offered, eyes brightening. Brielle smiled. "Not until you finish your cereal and put on socks." As Wyatt ran back inside in search of breakfast, Brielle leaned her head on Victor's shoulder, her voice quieter. "He's happier here." "So am I." She traced a line along his forearm. "We haven't had a real moment to breathe since the launch. Keep waiting for the chaos to start again." He turned to face her. "We built this to last, let's live in it." She hesitated. "My board still expects me to return full-time once the next quarter closes." "You're not staying." "Haven't decided." She met his gaze. "I love what we've started here. The work, the people, this life. But also know I'm the only one holding the company direction steady." Victor looked back toward the skyline. "I won't ask you to choose between your legacy and this." She reached for his hand. "You're wrong. This is my legacy, not the firm, not the numbers, this." He didn't speak, only held her tighter. By week's end, the second building had been completed. The community center expanded into the lower level, and families who'd been on a waiting list for years finally received keys. Victor had taken on the role of creative director for the expansion phase, while Brielle began mentoring local women in business development, setting up workshops in the evenings. One night, as the sun dipped behind the city's rooftops, Victor stood beside her in the central courtyard, where string lights had been hung between trees still rooting in fresh soil. Laughter echoed from the open windows, children played in the grass, and music drifted from the community hall. Brielle laced her fingers through his. "I never thought it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Not borrowed," she said. "Not temporary, just right." He leaned closer. "Then let's make sure it stays that way." She turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thin, hand-carved box. Inside was a simple gold band, its edges brushed with a subtle pattern one Victor had etched himself. She stared at it, stunned. "I don't have a rooftop orchestra or a jet to Paris," he said, "but I have this, Have us, and I want to wake up in this life with you every day. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't speak right away. Instead, she took the ring, slid it on, and whispered, "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They kissed beneath the lights, surrounded by the sound of a future they had created together, no longer defined by money or circumstance, but by a love that had rewritten every rule they'd ever known. The wedding was quiet. Held in the garden between the buildings, the ceremony was officiated by the first city councilwoman to support their housing initiative. Wyatt walked Brielle down the aisle, his small hand clutching hers proudly. The guest list wasn't long just neighbors, friends, partners who had stood by them from the beginning, but the love in that courtyard outshone any ballroom chandelier. Victor wore a tailored navy suit, his tie slightly crooked the way she liked it. Brielle wore a soft ivory dress that fell in elegant folds, the hem brushing the earth beneath her feet. There were no cameras, no press. Only whispered vows, a kiss that drew cheers from the children, and a first dance under open skies. Afterward, they sat together on the steps of their building, plates of cake balanced on their knees. "You know," Victor said, nudging her with his shoulder, "this isn't how I pictured my life turning out." She leaned into him, "Me neither. But I'm glad it did." She looked up at him, her eyes bright beneath the moonlight. "So am I." As Wyatt dozed beside them, curled up in his new suit jacket, Victor wrapped an arm around his wife and exhaled deeply. There were no more waiting rooms, no more uncertain tomorrows. Only this love, laughter, a community built with their hands, and a boy who now had two parents watching the stars beside him. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly as it should.